The Grand Council chamber of Nexus Prime buzzed with celebration. Holographic displays painted the curved walls in brilliant blues and golds, showing star maps where red markers, human colonies, had been systematically extinguished over the past 3 years. Admiral Zethkar of the Hegemony Fleet stood at the center of it all, his scaled chest swelling with pride. Around him, representatives from 14 different species raised their ceremonial goblets in triumph. The air itself seemed to sparkle with victory. Today, Zethkar announced, his voice booming through the chamber's acoustic amplifiers, we witness the end of the human plague. Their final stronghold on Terra falls to our combined might as we speak. The assembled delegates erupted in cheers. The crystalline collective chimed like wind bells. The gas-formed nebuloids pulsed with satisfied colors. Even the stoic mechanical syndicate flickered their optical sensors in approval. But in the back of the chamber, a lone figure remained silent. Commander Yiratel of the Villani Intelligence Corps watched the celebration with growing unease. Her pale blue skin had taken on a sickly green tinge, a sign of deep worry among her people. While others celebrated, she studied the tactical displays with the eye of someone who had spent decades analyzing human military doctrine. Something's wrong, she whispered to her aide, Lieutenant Corvex. Wrong? Admiral Zethkar just confirmed. The destruction of their orbital defenses. Earth's surrender is imminent. Yiratel shook her head, her long silver hair catching the light from the holographic displays. Look at the deployment patterns. Look at their fleet positions over the last 6 months. Corvex leaned in, following her pointing finger across the star chart. I don't understand. The humans have been retreating, but not randomly. Every withdrawal, every defeat, they've been falling back along specific vectors, mathematical precision, as if they were— Her words trailed off as a horrible realization dawned. As if they were what, Commander? Before Yiratel could answer, the chamber's communication array crackled to life. A transmission from the assault fleet at Earth filled the space above them. Admiral Teclon's image materialized, his reptilian features twisted in confusion rather than triumph. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship showed sparks and emergency lighting. Nexus Command, we have a situation. The celebration died instantly. Zethkar stepped forward, his own confusion evident. Report, Admiral. Have the humans surrendered? That's just it, sir. They haven't. The planet's surface defenses are gone. Completely dismantled, but not by our weapons. A chill ran through the chamber. Explain. They took them apart themselves, sir, piece by piece. Our forward scouts report massive construction operations in the outer system. It's like they were preparing. Yiratel felt her blood turn to ice. She'd seen this pattern before in the ancient war histories of her people. It was the mark of a civilization that understood exactly what it was doing. Admiral, she called out, her voice cutting through the confused murmur of the delegates. What's the status of the human fleet? The warships we've been tracking? Decalon's image flickered as he consulted his instruments. That's another oddity. Most of their known vessels are here, in the Sol system. But they're not defending. They're just watching. How many ships? Perhaps 200 destroyer-class vessels, 50 cruisers, a dozen of their larger battleships. That's not enough, Zethkar interrupted. Intelligence reports indicated they had over 3,000 vessels at the height of their expansion. Yiratel's aide, Corvex, had been working frantically at his portable computing unit. His face had gone pale, remarkable for his normally dark-skinned species, Commander, he whispered urgently. I've been cross-referencing our battle reports with stellar cartography data. Every engagement, every victory we've claimed. We never destroyed their shipyards. What do you mean? We destroyed their colonies, their mining operations, their civilian infrastructure. But in 3 years of war, we've never encountered a single major human shipyard. They always evacuated them before we arrived. The implications hit Yiratel like a physical blow. Around them, the other delegates were beginning to catch fragments of their whispered conversation. The celebration was turning into something else entirely. Admiral Teclon, she called out. I need you to run a deep scan of the outer Sol system, beyond Pluto, full spectrum analysis. Commander, you don't have the authority to do it, Zethkar snapped, finally understanding the gravity of what they might be facing. Long seconds passed. The chamber held its collective breath as the assault fleet's sensors reached out into the dark spaces beyond Earth's solar system. Then Theklan's face went completely white. Nexus Command, you need to see this. The holographic display above them shifted, showing the outer reaches of the Sol system. At first it looked empty, just the cold darkness between stars. But as the resolution increased, shapes began to emerge from the black ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships. Not the sleek, elegant vessels they'd been fighting for 3 years. These were different, larger, built with a brutal functionality that spoke of lessons learned in the hardest possible way. Dear ancestors, someone whispered. The human fleet hung in the darkness like a constellation of predators. Each vessel bristled with weapon systems that their databases had never cataloged. The smallest of them dwarfed the destroyer-class ships they'd been tracking. How many? Zethkar's voice was barely audible. Theklan consulted his readings with shaking hands. Preliminary count, 15,000 vessels, sir, and they're moving. As if summoned by his words, the human fleet began to accelerate. Not toward Earth, toward the hegemony forces surrounding it. In the command chamber on Nexus Prime, the delegates stared in horror as their assured victory transformed into something else entirely. The red markers on their star charts, the extinguished human colonies, suddenly took on a different meaning. They hadn't been crushing human resistance. They'd been herding humanity into exactly the position it wanted to be in. Yeratel watched, the display with a mixture of professional admiration and absolute terror. They knew, she whispered. From the very beginning, they knew this was coming. Every retreat, every defeat, they were buying time to build this. The human fleet continued its inexorable advance, and for the first time in the war, the Galactic hegemony began to understand what they were truly facing. The celebration was over. The real war was about to begin. Chapter 2. The mathematics of War Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Retribution, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she watched the enemy fleet scramble into defensive positions around Earth. The irony wasn't lost on her. After 3 years of running, hiding, and carefully orchestrated retreats, she was finally home. But Earth below them was not the same world she'd left. The blue marble of humanity's birthplace now showed the scars of war. Blackened continents where orbital bombardments had fallen, empty cities, silent communication networks. "Ma'am," called Captain Rodriguez from behind her. "The fleet reports. Ready for Phase 1. Chen turned to face her bridge crew. These weren't the fresh-faced academy graduates she'd started the war with. These were survivors, veterans who'd learned to fight an enemy that outnumbered them 100 to 1. Their faces showed the weight of 3 years spent in the dark between stars building, planning, and preparing for this moment. "How long until they finish their scans?" she asked. "Approximately 4 minutes, Admiral. Their sensors are good, but they're not expecting what we've actually built." Chen nodded. The hegemony had been fighting the human fleet they thought they knew, fast, lightly armed vessels designed for exploration and trade. They had no concept of what 3 years of focused warship construction could produce when an entire species put its mind to it. Signal the fleet. Begin the demonstration. Across 15,000 ships, weapon systems that had never been tested in battle came online. The hegemony forces would detect the energy signatures first, massive power outputs that dwarfed anything in their databases. On the bridge of Admiral Theklan's flagship, alarms began screaming. "Sir, energy spikes across the human fleet. Power readings are..." The sensor officer's voice trailed off in disbelief. "Report, Lieutenant. Each of their larger vessels is generating approximately 50 times the output of our heavy cruisers. Sir, the smaller ones, 20 times. These readings can't be correct." Theklan stared at the tactical display as thousands of new contacts lit up like stars. Each represented more firepower than his fleet had encountered in the entire war. "How is this possible?" Our intelligence was fed to you deliberately, a new voice interrupted. The bridge crew turned as a holographic figure materialized, a human woman in a crisp military uniform. The projection was crystal clear, indicating transmission power that shouldn't have been possible at this range. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy. You may remember my name from our previous encounters. Theclon's blood ran cold. He did indeed remember. Chen had been the human commander who'd led the defense of the Kepler 442 colony, the woman who'd somehow evacuated 50,000 civilians while simultaneously conducting a fighting retreat that cost his fleet 8 ships. Admiral Chen, he said carefully, I was told you died at Proxima Centauri. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. Her smile was not reassuring. I've been busy. We all have. The hologram gestured, and the display around her shifted to show technical schematics that made Theclon's tactical officers gasp. Allow me to introduce you to the UES Retribution-class dreadnought, 18 kilometers long. Primary armament, plasma lance batteries capable of cracking moons. Secondary systems include directed nuclear pulse weapons, antimatter torpedoes, and defensive arrays that your weapons simply cannot penetrate. The schematics rotated, showing the massive vessel in all its terrifying detail. We've built 300 of them. Impossible, Theclon breathed. Is it? Your forces have been very thorough in destroying our colonies, but you never touched our shipyards. Do you know why? The Admiral said nothing. Because we never built any. Every human vessel you've encountered in this war was constructed in deep space, in the dark between stars, using resources from asteroids you never bothered to catalog. While you were congratulating yourselves on destroying empty cities, we were building the largest fleet in galactic history. On Nexus Prime, Commander. Uratel watched the transmission with growing horror. Around her, the various alien delegates sat in stunned silence. She's telling the truth, Uratel whispered to her aide. Look at the construction techniques, the materials science. They've made quantum leaps in technology. In 3 years? When you're facing extinction, you innovate quickly. Her voice carried the weight of someone who finally understood the scope of humanity's deception. Every battle we won, every colony we destroyed, they were learning, adapting, taking our weapons, our tactics, our technology, and improving on it. Back in the Sol system, Admiral Chen continued her briefing with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. Now you might be wondering about the 200 ships you can see here in the inner system. Those aren't warships, Admiral. Those are observers. We wanted witnesses to what comes next. What do you want? Theclon asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Unconditional surrender of all hegemony forces, immediate withdrawal from human space, and reparations for the 60 billion civilians you murdered. You're outnumbered, Theclon protested. The combined hegemony fleet has over 1 million vessels. Had, Chen corrected. Past tense. You see, while you were here celebrating your victory, the rest of our fleet was paying visits to your home systems. The color drained from every face on the hegemony flagship's bridge. Surely you didn't think this was our entire force. We've spent 3 years mapping every hegemony world, every fleet base, every strategic asset. Right about now, your homeworlds are discovering what human engineering can accomplish when properly motivated. In the Nexus Prime command chamber, emergency transmissions began flooding in from across hegemony space. The reports were all variations on the same theme: massive human fleets appearing from nowhere, orbital defenses obliterated in minutes, planetary governments demanding immediate surrender. Admiral Zethkar stared at the incoming reports with dawning horror. How many ships do they have? Uratel was working frantically at her console, cross-referencing the attack reports with their intelligence estimates. Based on these coordinates and timing, conservative estimate, 500,000 vessels. Possibly more. 500,000? Zethkar's voice cracked. Our intelligence said they had 3,000 ships at most. Our intelligence was wrong, Uratel said quietly. They've been planning this from the moment we fired the first shot. Every retreat, every loss, every victory we achieved, It was all designed to bring us to this point. Back on the UES. Retribution. Admiral Chen checked her chronometer. You have 30 minutes to begin your withdrawal from Sol system, Admiral Theclon. After that, we'll consider your continued presence an act of war. You can't be serious. The galactic hegemony has fought wars for 10,000 years. Against opponents who played by your rules, Chen interrupted. We don't. You wanted to see what humans do when you threaten our families, our children, our very existence? Now you know. The transmission cut off, leaving the hegemony forces alone with the terrible mathematics of their situation. 15,000 human warships hung in space around them, each one representing more firepower than they'd ever imagined possible. On the observation deck of the Retribution, Admiral Chen turned to Captain Rodriguez. Signal the fleet. If they're not moving in 29 minutes, light them up. Yes, ma'am. And Admiral, it's good to be home. Chen looked down at the scarred surface of Earth, where the first signals of hope were beginning to emerge from the surviving cities. Yes, Captain, it is. The hegemony fleet began its retreat 18 minutes later, but the war was far from over. Chapter 3. The Reckoning. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy had been transformed. What the history books would later call the 30-day war had shattered the galactic hegemony's power structure and left human fleets in control of strategic positions throughout known space. But victory, Admiral Chen was learning, brought its own challenges. She stood in the conference room of Nexus Prime, formerly the hegemony's capital, now the provisional seat of something humanity was still learning to call peace. Around the curved table sat representatives of dozens of species, many of whom had spent the last 3 years trying to exterminate her people. The question before us, said Ambassador Jackson, Earth's lead negotiator, is not revenge. It's what comes next. Across from him, former Admiral Zethkar sat in what could only be described as protective custody. The proud warrior who had orchestrated the assault on human colonies now looked decades older, his scales dulled with defeat. Your people murdered 60 billion humans, Commander Yuratel said quietly. She'd been appointed as liaison between the surviving hegemony forces and Earth's occupation government. How do we simply move past that? Chen had been wondering the same thing. The human fleet now numbered over 800,000 vessels, more than enough to reduce every hegemony world to ash. The survivors among her own species were calling for exactly that. Because, Admiral Chen said finally, becoming monsters won't bring back the dead. The comment drew sharp looks from several human representatives. Captain Rodriguez, now serving as Chen's chief of staff, leaned forward. Admiral, with respect, they showed no mercy to our colonies. The footage from New Tokyo from Kepler Station. I've seen the footage, Captain. Chen's voice carried the weight of someone who'd watched her civilization burn. I've also seen what we're capable of when we embrace hatred. She activated a holographic display showing stellar cartography data. Red markers indicated former hegemony strongholds, planets that had surrendered without firing a shot when human fleets arrived. In 6 months, not a single civilian population has been harmed by our forces. Not one reprisal attack. Not one act of revenge. Do you know how rare that is in galactic history? Former Ambassador Crix of the Crystalline Collective chimed softly, their species equivalent of clearing their throat. Most conquering forces would have made examples. We're not most species, Chen replied. And we're not conquerors. We're survivors. The distinction seemed lost on some of the assembled delegates. The gas-formed nebuloids pulsed with confused colors, while the mechanical syndicate's representatives flickered their optical sensors in what Chen had learned was their version of skepticism. Then what do you want from us? Zethkar asked, speaking, for the first time in hours. Chen stood and walked to the viewing ports that looked out over Nexus Prime's sprawling cityscape. In the distance, human engineering crews worked alongside alien technicians to repair damage from the war. We want to make sure this never happens again. She turned back to face the assembly. The galactic hegemony attacked us because we were expanding too quickly, taking up too much space, threatening the established order. Fair enough. We were new to the galactic community and we made mistakes. But your response was to try to exterminate us. Completely. Men, women, children, everyone. That can't be allowed to stand. Ambassador Jackson activated his own display, showing legal documents that had been under negotiation for weeks. We're proposing the Nexus Accords, a galactic constitution that establishes basic rights for all sentient species. The right to exist, the right to defend themselves, the right to seek justice for crimes against their people. And who enforces these accords? Asked Representative Veltar of the Aquatic Consortium. We do, Chen said simply. The United Earth Navy becomes the galactic peacekeeping force. Any species that attempts genocide, any government that wages war against civilians, any entity that threatens the basic rights of sentient beings, we stop them. The room erupted in protests. The idea of humans as galactic police was clearly not popular among the former hegemony species. You can't be serious, Sethkar protested. One species cannot dictate policy for the entire galaxy. Why not? Chen asked. You tried to do exactly that for 10,000 years. That was different. How? The question hung in the air. Yuratel, who had been quietly reviewing the proposed accords, looked up with something like admiration in her pale blue eyes. It's not different, she said softly. That's exactly what we did. We established rules that benefited us and enforced them with superior firepower. She stood and faced her fellow delegates. The difference is that humans are proposing to enforce rules that protect everyone. Chen nodded. We're not asking for tribute. We're not demanding subjugation. We're asking for civilization. And if we refuse? Asked the Mechanical Syndicate representative, optical sensors focusing with mechanical precision. Captain Rodriguez started to respond, but Chen held up a hand. This was a question that required careful handling. Then you'll discover that humans have very long memories and very little patience for those who threaten innocent lives. The implied threat was unmistakable, but it was delivered with the calm certainty of someone stating a natural law. However, Chen continued, we'd prefer cooperation. The galaxy is vast. There's room for all of us, provided we can agree on some basic rules of behavior. Over the following hours, the debate continued. Some species argued for modifications to the proposed accords. Others questioned humanity's right to enforce galactic law. A few, led by Yuratel and a surprising number of younger delegates, argued that the accords didn't go far enough in establishing protections for vulnerable species. But underlying all the discussion was a simple mathematical reality. Humanity now possessed the largest, most advanced fleet in known space. Their shipyards were producing new vessels at a rate that defied belief. And every human officer from Admiral Chen down to the newest recruit remembered exactly what had happened to their colonies. As the session drew to a close, former Admiral Zethkar approached Chen privately. I have to ask, he said quietly, how long were you planning this? How long did you know you could build such a fleet? Chen considered the question carefully. We didn't know if we could do it. We only knew we had to try. But the coordination, the logistics, the strategic deception, Admiral, you made one fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. Which was? Chen's smile was tired but genuine. You assumed we were like you. That we thought in terms of conquest and domination. But humans don't wage war to win territory or resources. We fight to protect what we love. She gestured toward the viewport, where Earth hung as a distant blue dot. Every ship we built, every weapon we forged, every strategy we developed, it was all aimed at one goal, making sure our children would have a future. Everything else was just mathematics. 3 weeks later, the Nexus Accords were signed by representatives of 47 species. The United Earth Navy officially became the Galactic Peace Corps, with a mandate to protect civilian populations and prevent crimes against sentience. Admiral Chen kept her flagship, the UES Retribution, but its mission had changed. Instead of hunting enemy fleets, it now served as the mobile headquarters for humanitarian missions throughout the galaxy. But the ship's weapons systems remained fully operational. because while humans preferred peace, they had learned to be very, very good at war. The galaxy had declared victory too soon. Now it was learning to live with the consequences. Chapter 4: The New Guardians. 2 years after the signing of the Nexus Accords, Admiral Chen found herself facing a crisis no one had anticipated. The UES Retribution hung in orbit above Kepler 438b, where a refugee crisis was unfolding on a massive scale. 70 million beings, reported Captain Rodriguez, his voice heavy with exhaustion. 3 different species, all fleeing the same thing. Chen studied the tactical display showing the planet below. What had once been a prosperous trading world was now a sprawling collection of refugee camps with more ships arriving daily. And you're certain about the reports? As certain as we can be without direct observation. The Devourers, that's what the refugees are calling them, appeared 6 months ago in the Outer Rim. Unknown species, unknown technology. They don't negotiate, they don't communicate. They just consume. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's chief, xenobiologist, materialized via hologram from her research vessel. Admiral, I've been analyzing the survivor testimonies. This isn't like anything in our databases. These aren't invaders in the traditional sense. They're more like a natural disaster with intelligence. Explain. Every refugee tells the same story. The Devourers arrive, set up massive extraction operations, and strip entire worlds of all organic matter, vegetation, animal life, even soil bacteria. They leave behind perfectly spherical, lifeless rocks. Chen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bridge's environmental systems. How many worlds? 17 confirmed. Possibly more. The refugee flow suggests they're moving systematically through the Outer Rim systems. Time to Earth? Captain. Rodriguez consulted his calculations. At their current rate of expansion, 18 months, maybe less. The bridge fell silent. Around them, the crew of the Retribution continued their duties, but Chen could see the tension in their movements. These were veterans of the Hegemony War, battle-tested and confident. But this was something new. Captain, signal the fleet. I want every available ship at Nexus Prime within 72 hours. Ma'am, that's our entire peacekeeping force. If we pull back, then we risk losing everything we've built. Chen turned to face her bridge crew. The Nexus Accords mean nothing if we can't protect the species that signed them. 3 days later, the largest gathering of human warships since the end of the Hegemony War assembled in the Nexus Prime system. 800,000 vessels, ranging from scout ships to the massive Retribution-class dreadnoughts, filled local space like a mechanical constellation. In the station's main conference hall, representatives from across the galaxy waited in nervous silence. Many were species that had fought against humanity just 2 years earlier. Now they looked to human leadership for salvation. Commander Yiratel, now serving as the Accord's chief intelligence coordinator, activated the central display. The situation is worse than our initial reports indicated. Long-range sensors have detected at least 40 destroyed systems. The Devourers are accelerating their consumption rate. She highlighted a section of the galactic map where star systems simply ended. Where once there had been thriving colonies, trade routes, and civilization, now there was only empty space and dead worlds. We estimate their total force at approximately 50,000 vessels. Each one is roughly equivalent to our heavy cruiser class in terms of raw firepower. But their technology is different. The display shifted to show scanner data from refugee ships that had escaped Devourer attacks. The alien vessels were unlike anything in the galactic databases, organic-looking things that seemed to grow rather than being built. They're biological, Dr. Vasquez explained via hologram. Part machine, part living organism. Their ships actually heal damage over time, and they seem to improve their capabilities by consuming the technology they encounter. Former Admiral Zethkar, now serving as military advisor to the Accords Council, leaned forward. Have you attempted communication? Every method we know, Yiratel replied. Mathematical sequences, universal constants, even basic pictographs, nothing. They don't respond to any form of contact except weapons fire. And when fired upon, They adapt, quickly. Refugees report that by the third or fourth engagement, Devourer vessels were completely immune to the weapons being used against them. Admiral Chen had been listening in silence, her mind working through the implications. Finally, she stood. "Ladies, gentlemen, beings of all classifications," she began, using the formal address established by the Accords. "We face a threat unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Devourers aren't conquerors, they're an extinction event." She activated her command codes, and the display shifted to show the full scope of human fleet deployment. However, they've made one critical error. They've given us time to prepare. The tactical display showed something that made even veteran military officers gasp. The human fleet wasn't just larger than it had been during the Hegemony War, it was fundamentally different. For the past 2 years, while serving as peacekeepers, our engineers have been studying every piece of alien technology they could access. Hegemony weapons, crystalline collective shield systems, nebuloid stealth technology, mechanical syndicate targeting computers. We've integrated the best of galactic science into our fleet. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Additionally, our shipyards have been operating at maximum capacity. We now have manufacturing facilities in 14 systems, producing vessels, specifically designed for deep space warfare. The display showed technical specifications that left the assembled delegates stunned. The new human warships weren't just improvements on existing designs. They represented quantum leaps in capability. But most importantly, Chen continued, we've learned something the Devourers haven't anticipated: how to cooperate. She gestured to the mixed crews visible on several ship displays, humans working alongside former enemies, species that had never even met before the Accords, learning to function as unified teams. Every major species has contributed personnel to our fleet: crystalline navigators, aquatic engineers, mechanical targeting specialists, nebuloid stealth operators. We're not just humanity defending the galaxy. We're the galaxy defending itself. Commander, Uratel activated a new section of the display. Intelligence suggests the Devourers will reach the Kepler sector within 6 months. We propose to meet them there at the edge of civilized space and stop them cold. And if you can't? Asked Representative Kelvec of the Silicon-based coalition. Chen's expression hardened. Then we fall back to the next defensive line, and the next, until every ship is destroyed and every world is defended. You're talking about a war of extinction, Sethkar observed. Yes, Chen replied without hesitation. We are, because the alternative is extinction without war. The vote to authorize Operation Galactic Shield was unanimous. Over the following months, the greatest military buildup in galactic history took place. Human shipyards worked around the clock, producing vessels equipped with adaptive technology, designed to counter the Devourers' biological advantages. Mixed species crews trained in tactics that combined the best military traditions of dozens of civilizations. But perhaps most importantly, the scattered refugee populations were organized into a massive early warning network. Every survivor who had escaped the Devourers brought valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and patterns. As Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the final preparations for humanity's greatest battle, she reflected on how much had changed since that day in the Sol system when she'd first confronted the hegemony. Then, they had been fighting for survival. Now they were fighting for something much larger, the very concept of civilization itself. The Devourers were coming. But they would find something waiting for them that they had never encountered before, an entire galaxy that had learned to stand together. The real test was about to begin. Epilogue. The stars remember. 10 years after the Battle of Kepler Station, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the Memorial Hall on New Geneva Station, reading the names of the fallen. The walls curved upward into a dome that showed the night sky, not as it appeared from any single world, but as a composite image representing every species that had joined the fight against the Devourers. Each star represented a life lost in defense of galactic civilization. Admiral? Captain Rodriguez approached quietly, his own uniform showing the decorations earned in a decade of peacekeeping missions. The council is ready for your final briefing. Chen nodded, taking one last look at the memorial. Over 2 million names were inscribed here. Humans, yes, but also crystalline collective members, aquatic consortium engineers, mechanical syndicate tacticians, and dozens of other species who had stood together when extinction came calling. The White Battle of Kepler Station had lasted 6 months. The Devourers had brought 50,000 vessels of terrifying capability. The Allied forces had met them with nearly 1 million ships crewed by beings who had learned to fight as one. In the end, it hadn't been superior firepower that won the day. It had been something the Devourers, for all their adaptive capabilities, couldn't counter: the willingness of different species to sacrifice themselves for others. Chen made her way to the council chambers, where representatives from across the galaxy waited. Many were faces she recognized from those desperate early days when humanity had been fighting for its very survival. Others were newer, species discovered in the expansion that followed the Devourer War, civilizations that had never known the threat of extinction. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, she began, using the traditional opening of Galactic Council sessions. Today marks my retirement from active duty as Supreme Admiral of the Galactic Defense Force. The announcement was expected, but it still drew murmurs from the assembled delegates. Chen had led the unified fleet for over a decade, overseeing not just the defeat of the Devourers but the subsequent exploration and colonization efforts that had tripled the size of known space. When the hegemony first attacked Earth, she continued, humanity learned something important about the nature of survival. We learned that it's not enough to simply endure. You have to be willing to change, to grow, to become something larger than what you were. She activated the main display, showing a map of current galactic civilization. Where once there had been scattered, often hostile species maintaining careful boundaries, now there was a network of cooperation that spanned thousands of worlds. Today we have joint colonies where 3 or 4 species work together. We have research stations where scientists from dozens of worlds collaborate on projects that benefit everyone. We have trade routes that connect civilizations that had never even heard of each other a generation ago. Commander Uratel, now serving as Director of Interspecies Relations, smiled from her place in the delegate section. And we have ships crewed by mixed species, where a human captain might have a crystalline navigator, a mechanical weapons officer, and an aquatic engineer. Exactly, Chen agreed. We've become something new, not human civilization or crystalline civilization or any single species' vision of the future. We've become galactic civilization. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. But we've also learned that such civilization is fragile. The Devourers weren't the last threat we'll face. There are still unexplored regions of space, still unknown dangers lurking in the dark between stars. The price of survival is eternal vigilance. Admiral Marcus Webb, Chen's designated successor, stood from his position with the Earth delegation. A veteran of both the Hegemony War and the Devourer conflict, he represented the new generation of human leadership, officers who had never known a time when humanity stood alone. The Galactic Defense Force currently maintains active fleets in 47 sectors, he reported. Our early warning networks extend beyond mapped space, and our shipyards continue to produce vessels equipped with the best technology from across the galaxy. More importantly, added Dr. Vasquez, now serving as the Council's chief science advisor, our research programs have developed technologies that didn't exist when we first encountered the Devourers. Adaptive shielding, quantum communication, arrays, even experimental weapons that can target biological technology specifically. Chen nodded approvingly. The lessons learned in desperate battle had become the foundation for an unprecedented era of scientific advancement. Which brings me to my final point, she said. When I first took command of human forces during the Hegemony War, I thought we were fighting for humanity's survival. During the Devourer War, I believed we were fighting for galactic survival. But I was wrong both times. She gestured to the diverse assembly before her, beings of crystal and metal, gas and liquid, carbon and silicon, all united in common purpose. We were fighting for something much more important. We were fighting for the idea that different forms of life can coexist, can learn from each other, can become stronger together than they ever could apart. The chamber fell silent as the weight of her words settled over them. The galaxy declared victory too soon when they thought they had defeated humanity. But humanity would have declared victory too soon if we had simply survived. True victory only came when we learned to build something better than what came before. She turned to Admiral Webb. Marcus, the fleet is yours. Guard it well, but remember, our greatest weapon was never our ships or our technology. It was our willingness to see former enemies as future allies. As the ceremony concluded and delegates began to disperse, Chen found herself alone with a few old friends. Commander Yuratel approached, her pale blue skin showing the satisfied purple hues of deep contentment. So what will you do now, Admiral? Return to Earth? Chen smiled, looking out through the station's viewing ports at the bustling traffic of a dozen different species. I think I'll stay here for a while. New Geneva has become something special, a place where the impossible became routine. Captain Rodriguez joined them carrying a data pad. Admiral, before you officially retire, there's one last report you should see. Oh? Long-range sensors have detected something in the Andromeda approach vector. It's big. Chen raised an eyebrow. How big? Preliminary scans suggest a fleet of approximately 10 million vessels. Unknown configuration. They'll reach our outer monitoring stations in about 5 years. For a moment, the old tension returned to Chen's shoulders. Then she laughed, a sound of genuine amusement that surprised everyone present. You know what, Captain? That's Admiral Webb's problem now. She looked around at her companions, former enemies who had become trusted friends, allies forged in the crucible of desperate battle, representatives of a civilization that had learned to thrive on diversity. Besides, I have complete confidence that when they get here, they'll find something they're not expecting. Which is? Chen's smile grew wider. A galaxy that knows how to make friends out of enemies, how to turn disasters into opportunities, and how to face the impossible with nothing more than determination and a willingness to stand together. She paused, her expression growing more serious. The hegemony thought they could eliminate humanity through superior force. The Devourers thought they could consume everything through adaptive evolution. Both learned the same lesson. Never underestimate the power of cooperation. And if these new arrivals prove hostile, Yuratel asked, then they'll learn it too. As night cycle began on New Geneva Station, Admiral Sarah Chen retired to her quarters for the last time as Supreme Commander. Through her window, she could see the lights of 1,000 different vessels. Human ships working alongside former hegemony cruisers, crystalline exploration vessels partnered with mechanical research platforms, mixed crews preparing for missions. That would have been inconceivable just a generation earlier. The galaxy had declared victory too soon, thinking they had eliminated the human threat. Humanity had declared victory too soon, believing they had defeated their enemies. Even the Devourers had declared victory too soon, assuming they could consume everything in their path. But true victory, Admiral Chen reflected, wasn't about defeating your enemies. It was about convincing them to become your friends. And in that regard, the galaxy had finally learned to win. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, as if approving of what they had witnessed. Because they remembered everything, every battle fought, every alliance forged, every moment when beings chose cooperation over conquest, and they were already preparing to witness whatever came next. In the depths of space, 5 years away at faster than light speeds, 10 million alien vessels continued their inexorable approach toward a galaxy that had learned to turn enemies into allies. They would find out soon enough what that meant. The story of humanity's place among the stars was just beginning. The end.